that which we're unable to integrate, it will inevitably become evoked in others. We'll find or we'll locate that material outside of us in another person, in a group of persons, by way of that process that we call projection, which takes place outside of our conscious awareness, meaning we don't know that we're projecting. If we know that we're doing it, then it's not projection, it's something else. But projection is a natural process that's actually at its core intelligent and creative. If we're unable to be in touch with a particular emotion or feeling or quality within us, psyche will locate that quality outside of us in the hopes that we can reunite with it. There's a lot of misunderstanding about this process of projection. If I'm not able to be in contact with my own fear or shame or narcissism or loneliness, anger or rage, whatever it happens to be for us, I will tend to find those qualities in another person, in another group of person, and begin to relate with them in that way. I mean, I'm sure it's no surprise. Maybe it's a total coincidence. You'll have to let me know. But there's a way that we are attracted to, or we attract to us, people, persons who manifest those qualities that we've disowned in ourselves. I see this in a lot of couples therapy, for example. Again, probably just coincidence, right? But so that's one thing that can happen, if we aren't able to be in to contact, to feel, to articulate, and to make sense of our experience. If we're unable to integrate that, it has a way of being evoked in others by way of that process of projection, which is an alchemical process, actually. And if that mutual projection happens in a clinical type relationship for you therapists out there, of course, we call this transference, countertransference dynamics, which isn't really taught to therapists that much these days, which is a whole other issue. Okay, so that's that one. So two other possibilities, right? The second we might refer to as enactment, where we will enact that split off, disowned, dissociated material within the relational field, meaning we'll sort of dramatically play it out in our relationships, especially with those in our lives who we've allowed to matter to us. Remember, that is one way that we're defining close personal relationships. Isn't just an intimate relationship, it can include that, of course, romantic relationships, but any relationship where we take the risk in allowing the other person to really matter to us. And why is that? Why is that a risk? What's so risky about that? Well, I think when we allow another person to matter to us, which, let's be honest, first of all, isn't all that natural or easy for many of us, because it evokes those two great fears, concerns, trepidations, which are wired into any close relationship. Those archetypal fears that I'll either be abandoned, left alone, forsaken on the one hand, or the other side is that I'll be swallowed up by the other. unconsciously fused with them. I'll lose myself, I'll drown in them, or just dissolve into their essence or their agenda. I'll just go along with them and lose any sort of sense of self, of me as an individual. And so I think a confrontation with these two archetypal energies almost always comes up in longer term therapy or inner work or spiritual path work. And of course, some of us will come into adulthood with a template where we're specializing in one side of that dynamic or one pole of the archetype. And surprisingly, again, maybe just a coincidence, but we tend to attract partners, be attracted to a friend or a partner who might specialize in the other pole, the other side. Not because we're neurotic or unevolved or unspiritual or masochistic or anything like that, but so that we can work through it. We can tend to that aspect of ourselves who has fallen into the shadow, who's lost, frozen, crystallized back there in that time machine of relational wounding, because that's what it is. It's a time machine where parts of us can become lost, frozen, trapped, forgotten, frozen, crystallized at earlier times in our lives. If we're able to take relationship as path, which is probably the most difficult and the most fruitful yoga that many of us have in this day and age, is that yoga of intimacy, of the yoga of relationship as path. It's not an easy one, but we might be able to come to see this otherness that, of course, our partners, friends, children, parents will represent or personify. We come to see that otherness as an ally of integration, or as an emissary or a representative of wholeness. So this second occurrence, of enactment, our unconscious shadow material will meet theirs, will meet the other, the same in the other. And our unresolved traumatic organization, embodied vulnerabilities, and historic sensitivities will mingle with theirs. And we'll play this out, right? But like projection, this process that we call enactment is something that happens outside our conscious awareness. We don't know that we're doing it, for the most part, until or unless it's pointed out to us or it's somehow revealed to us through some grace or something. And I think in the work that I've done with couples over the years, I used to do a lot more work with couples, but as well as individuals who are in relationship or longing to be in relationship. Of course, a large part of that therapy, a large part of that work involves unearthing, illuminating, and untangling these enactments, which is not easy, because to really do that, we're going to have to come back and be face to face with all of that material that we've spent our entire lives, organizing around not feeling. And while I think that there's a deep longing to do that because we know what the fruit of that will be. Of course, I want that kind of healing. I want that kind of transformation. I want that. Sign me up. Let's go. And I think that's a genuine part of ourself that really does want that. I want to heal. I want to transform. I want to awaken. I want to tell a new story, dream a new dream. I think it's important to honor, respect, listen to that aspect of ourselves. And in my experience anyway, in my own life and also in my clinical work, there's almost always, we could take the almost out, but I'll just say it that way. There's almost always another part of us that has an unconscious investment in maybe not healing or transforming so quickly or at all. Because I think on some level we know what that's going to require. It's going to require that direct, immediate, conscious, embodied, naked confrontation with the unlived life within us, with the heart, with the shadow. So, this unintegrated experience, this unlived experience can become evoked in another person, in another group of persons. It can be enacted, played out in relationship. And then the third option, what was the third option? The third option is that, right, it might become somatized. And so what does that mean? Well, when something becomes somatized, that means that it appears or it manifests or it takes form in our bodies, in our physical bodies, as what we might call a symptom of one form or another, some form of unwanted or strange or unexpected, unclear symptoms shows up in our throats, takes up residence there, maybe some constriction or maybe some esophageal reflux that we can't find any sort of medical cause for. Maybe we're not able to speak or communicate something that's really important to us that we need to say to ourselves, to our partners, to our kids, to our ex-spouses, to our parents, alive or dead, to God, to the divine, to goddess. Or we need to assert some sort of need or boundary in our lives, to say no to someone or to disappoint someone. And there's a way that we can do just about anything, really. And that includes really selling ourselves out in a certain way. And this is the prostitute archetype, which we all have within us, by the way. We'll do anything to not have to disappoint someone because of what that will cause us to have to feel, to be in touch with, or to confront. What would that mean about me as a person? Say all of that becomes congealed, that whole dynamic becomes congealed or frozen or coagulated in the throat, just as one example of this process of somatization. Or it could manifest in our bellies as a certain wave of nausea or butterflies or some restlessness or even as some sort of digestive problem, or in our hearts as a emptiness or a longing or a fast heartbeat or an irregular heartbeat or a sadness or a melancholy or a tenderness, or as some flushing, in our face or skin, which is not uncommon for people that I've worked with. some tension in our face or our eyes or neck, or think of one really strange rash that one client had, and on and on and on. The basic idea being that undigested, unprocessed, unmetabolized emotional experience can emerge by way of the body.